Okay, I would like to welcome all journalists to the Q&A session. I have with me Dr. Fares Mili and Dr. Solomon Atamane, and of course, Anastasia Barbouni, all members, founding members of SCOHRE. And we are pleased to answer all questions. Just to inform you, there was a declaration of the meeting that was sent to you by Mrs. Nicolopoulou, and I hope that everyone has it in his email or handy to check the declaration of this no smoke meeting. And we are ready to respond to your questions. Okay, so Anastasia, what impressed you the most from our summit?
Oh, the variety of presentation and the topics. They cover all the aspects of the new novel products, but not only the new novel products, but the novel products, but the harm reduction in general, and harm reduction as a step for the chronic diseases. That it is one of our target in SCOHRE. And
Dr. Mili?
The expert panels are interesting, and we have a view of different problems that we can save different countries and different continents. In the other sessions, I think science was presented and evidences was presented, and I think it was good sessions.
Okay, and Dr. Atamane?
No, I also agree. There was a variety of presentations and very good research, ongoing research on the different types of, alternative products to combustible cigarette. And I think there was also a very interesting look at the various regulations worldwide on what countries do in relation to tobacco-related products. Specifically in Africa, we're looking at tobacco harm reduction. And the main message was really that we need to have a very harmonious approach to tobacco harm reduction. We should know what it is that we are saying and know how to communicate that effectively.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Now we have one question. What are the next steps in SCOHRE? Well, what I thought, and of course we can hear the thoughts of all the others, is that we need to communicate, as Dr. Atamane says, all these messages derived from this summit and from our declaration during our foundation procedure to the European Union regulators and present the new smoking cessation SIMs that are a combination of classic medications like the NRTs and electronic cigarettes, present the notion of harm reduction derived from data from these novel smoking products, and create a discussion around it, particularly in high-risk population like cardiovascular disease patients and patients with cancer. Anastasia, what is your opinion on that? And your
I agree with this is that you have mentioned is one of our big step. Another objective is to establish a dialogue with the policy expert and regulators, and to in order to have a reasonable intervention that focus on preventing new nicotine use, and especially among patients youth.
Okay. Well, another
Dialogue is
okay. Another question has arrived. One issue that was raised during the meeting is the need for alliances of scientific and medical societies. What are your plans, meaning the plans of SCOHRE on that? Well, from the meeting, we have seen that, for example, toxicologists, biochemical societies, cardiology societies, oncology societies are getting familiarized with the notion of harm reduction. They seem to realize that they should not leave their patient continue smoking, but offer an alternative. So to this end, we are going to collaborate between these societies. And of course, the main issue is not just to make an alliance and present that in summit. And of course, it's very useful to have the conclusions from a summit, but is to present all these alliances, all these thoughts, and of course, all these methods to achieve harm reduction to the regulators in order to support it within the health system, the health system in every European country, every ASEAN country, every African country.
I think that is true.
Yeah.
Because it means we have to translate research into practice.
Exactly, present, because we have research, however, we have to familiarize all the regulators with this research, and we have to have a voice to present this alternative methodology to achieve a reduction in the lethal effects of smoking.
Mm.
There is another question. An issue also raised was that medical doctors privately tell their patients to use alternative products, but they hesitate to tell it openly in the public. Can you comment? Well, this is another target of, I suppose, of our of societies and scientific forums like ours to communicate these alternatives and to and not to and to not to make this procedure, this let's say this methodology, not to create any guilt to the scientists that because it is related to nicotine, it is related to a product, this may necessarily mean harm for the health of the patient. And this is something that we have to stress probably, and to explain and to support it with data. Dr. Milley and Dr.
Yes, I totally agree with what you say. And I want to add something that if we can explain to all doctors that smoking is a real addiction, then we need harm reduction as we need it in substance users, other substance users. In all substance users, we need harm reduction because give up addiction is difficult. It's in specific time, or all time, or in specific populations, in specific persons with comorbidities. It is very hard to give up the addiction and the behavior. So it is a necessity and not a choice. Harm reduction is a necessity. Someone can give up the habit and give up the behavior, and others cannot. Because of that, we must offer them another choice to manage their lives and their moods. And if we can, if we can give this information to all doctors, then I'm sure we can say most of them recommend harm reduction for many people and many patients.
To this end, actually, there is another question. During the session about human rights and ethics, a speaker said about the barrier of removing an addiction with another addiction is considered immoral. Can you comment? Let's start with Dr. Atamane. What's your opinion?
I think this is a very important question, and it means that we have to find a way of communicating the outcomes of our research. Number one, that there are many toxins in combustible cigarette, and these have been associated with high rates of different types of cancer, particularly cancer of the lung, that the alternative products do not have toxins that are found in combustible cigarettes. What we do have, it's nicotine delivered differently. I think that education is important. The point about this is that if nicotine is a common factor in terms of why people want to smoke, is it reasonable to deliver nicotine maybe in reduced amounts, but with safer methods rather than combustible tobacco? I think this is a key argument here, because we're trying to promote good health. We're trying to help people breathe with ease, go about their daily life with ease. So we do not see the actual smoking itself as addiction. However, if we use these alternative products, we must also make available in different countries smoking cessation clinics. We have to allow people opportunity to undergo some psychotherapy, so that maybe they don't need the alternative products that will help them transition to the point where they can reduce smoking, but they can learn methods of coping that are such that they will not need the alternative products.
Anastasia?
Yes, I think from a public health aspect is a matter of risk assessment. We have to find something more safer, not absolutely safer, than the combustible cigarettes. So I think we can use something, some approach like that. That is common in public health method. We know that from sexual transmitted diseases, from the opioids or the products that we use in these circumstances. I think it is ethical and moral to find something more safer, not absolutely safe.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would rather say to this question, I think it is immoral if I leave a patient with heart disease or a patient with cancer to carry on smoking a combustible cigarette. That is immoral. And
Yes.
Immoral is, it is moral if this patient is not willing to quit smoking or has tried and has failed. I have to provide as a scientist an alternative. An alternative that will reduce the chance of having a second heart attack or a new cancer or an exacerbation of the current cancer. So I think this would be immoral if I sort of close my eyes and say, okay, keep on smoking. That's immoral for a medical doctor to do so. So let's go to another question. Do you think that Europe should adopt the example of UK and New Zealand and promote vaping to replace cigarettes? Anastasia, let's start from you.
As Joy before present us, that works, and we have to take that in mind. Maybe we can try, because we saw from their presentation that in New Zealand the smoker prevalence has declined. Maybe we can use it. We can use that approach. I agree to use that.
Yeah, I also agree that we are open societies and we should familiarize public with all the options available to reduce harm. Of course, we are going to explain the pros and cons, and we're going to explain that if you have a 95% less emission to toxicants, that doesn't mean that you don't have the 5% effect. However, it is much, much better, instead of carry on smoking, to use and to replace and to switch. This is an option, and I believe this is something that is a reality also that we have to face. People by themselves, they opt to switch from tobacco, combustible tobacco, to novel smoking products. So we have to deal also with their choice, which is on the right direction, and not to create obstacles for this choice.
Yes.
I don't know, Faris, Millie, and Dr. Ratamane, if you have something to add.
Sorry, Ignatius, but we have to mention that it is only for smokers, not for not smokers, only to switch.
Exactly, as the question says, to replace cigarettes.
Yes, replace.
Yes,
Paris?
I think it's also a human right issue. I think we must inform public of the toxicity of products they consume, and let them choose which way they want to take, which product they want to consume. We must inform them, and inform them really, and in reality, you must explain them the toxicity of each product. And I think that's the way which we can promote scientific associations have a big role to do, is to deal with policymakers and with other medical associations and scientific associations, because altogether policymakers can have another choice.
And Dr. Ratamane?
I agree with what has been said about allowing people to choose. Those who smoke, who want to stop smoking, we afford them the opportunity to choose. We also realize that just using vaping in our products, whilst it's good, it's helpful, we also have to address the underlying associated mental health issues, if they may be there. For instance, some people have high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression, and so on. Those things must be attended to. That is why it's necessary to have some kind of smoking cessation clinics where people can get therapy, can get also just ordinary understanding and explanation of how these vaping products work. We also know that there are people who, after using the vaping products, even though they don't really want to go back to smoking, on their own, they choose to just continue using the vaping product. They don't necessarily want to stop completely. So there are many of those combinations, but the choice must be given openly to people.
Okay, there is also another question that there was an idea in the first session today that a fund may be created by industry to fund independent studies to verify industry data. What do you think? Is it possible? It would be better. Would it be better if governments duplicate this funding? Well, I will give my opinion, of course, so the others can express their opinion as well. I think that the industry can find some scientific forums or scientific, let's say, organizations promote, give their funding, and just ask this organization to support research studies on smoking. And for example, we do have like a Hellenic Cardiac Society. There can be a donation to Hellenic Cardiac Society, and the Hellenic Society can ask for ideas for research products related to smoking, and then, you know, that way fund research on this area. And this will be also an independent way to support research. Of course, it would be also an interesting idea to have a committee, a governmental committee, that could use this sort of funding. This is another, I think, option. Both of them seem appealing to me. And I can hear your opinion, Anastasia.
I totally agree with you, and mainly I think a committee will be a better option because committee has the inside the dialogue and a lot of parties, and maybe it looks more independent.
Yes, I also agree. However, there must be a provision that such funding from companies should not influence the researcher in a particular direction. So they must allow the researcher independence of research. And I think that is why it's important to have a committee that will include government members to make sure that there is a written, consent for these grants, for the allocation. The researchers must have independence in their day-to-day work, but they must not be influenced to push the line of the company. I think that is where the biggest problem is. It's a whole issue of perverse incentives. The grant must not be seen as a perverse incentive. It must be seen as a pursuit for science, research, and a pursuit of knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree, particularly when there is need for verification, then a governmental committee is necessary in order to secure the independent viewing, and who is going to perform the research is going to be decided by the committee, of course, and this will allow an independent, aspect. However, I suppose that if industry is funding various research organizations or scientific organizations in cancer, in heart societies, lung societies, and each society decides to support, to receive different research projects and support one of these by funding, such as a project related to smoking. This also would be a good idea, because it's not the industry that chooses the subject or chooses who is going to perform the research, but it is the scientific organization, the scientific society that decides the topic and the person to using, of course, scientific criteria. We have also another question, and since we have only 3 minutes to carry on, one question says that scientists around the world and governments work together for COVID. Why can't we do the same for smoking? And there is also another hot, I think, question is, no doubt that tobacco harm reduction is efficient, cost-effective, and beneficial. What strategy would you advise to take to change the prohibitionist policy of WHO towards alternative products? How to prevent codification or ban of harm reduction products in international national laws, how to decrease morale and panic and mobilize attention of more policy makers, how to open medical societies. We have learned also today that people are not, and health regulatory bodies are those fighting for tobacco, nicotine-free world. Well, just because it's a very long sentence, I would say this is the purpose of such forums like No Smoke Summit, and all associations that are dealing with this notion should include more members, should communicate their thoughts through, I think, communication means, radio, television, through forums, through summits, and this is something that needs effort. Nothing is going to be easy, and but I think we are on the right track, because as I can see, at least in Greece, the last few years, we have communicated the notion of harm reduction, and we can see that there are a lot of open ears to this process and to this methodology, at least in the scientific societies. Now we need to find open ears to the regulators and to the policy makers. That's, I think, the next step. We have first to persuade our scientific environment, and I'm sure that this can be communicated as a next step to the regulators. And your opinion, each one of you, Professor Barbouni, Professor Mili, and Professor Stratamanen, we have to close the session.
Thank you. Briefly, I think, the lessons we've learned around COVID and how scientists and governments work together, it's a very good one that can be pursued. But of course, with the provisions that we made, having a committee to look at the various options and what is possible in terms of funding for research and so on.
Okay, Professor Mili.
Yes, we must keep in mind that there is a big and important player in this field. It's WHO. WHO is not does not accept these products, and we must convince them. I think that collaborating with scientific associations and scientists and with evidences, and if we can spread evidences, we can make WHO experts change their decisions.
Yes.
Well, there is a final question here, which I would like to answer about youth being a target group for marketing purposes and vaping brands. What are our thoughts about it? At least my personal opinion is that we have to keep the strict regulations regarding the age under 18, the same regulations that apply for any tobacco product, and make it clear that we speak about smokers that want to switch to a better and less harmful use of tobacco. It's not for new. It's not something that we can try and please ourselves, because nicotine by itself has also an effect on our health. So it's not for a new person to just try and please himself. This is not safe for the health, but it is for these smokers that are unwilling or unable to quit smoking. And
Yes.
have just to listen to your opinion as well, and we can close the session. Dr. Ratamana.
No, I agree with you, and I think a repetition of that information is important. Number one, to WHO. Number two, to policymakers in various governments of the world. I think it's important to repeat that information, but allow scientists to continue doing their work to prove that these alternative products, for those who want to stop smoking, are actually very helpful and beneficial to their health. Thank you.
Dr. Mealy?
Yes, I think it's a problem. It was amplified by instances by FDA, by WHO. We are not bringing another addiction for youth. If we have a good regulation, as it is in UK, for example, and even in the United States, we have really very few number of new youth users of nicotine, daily users or frequent users of nicotine. And the majority of youth are experimentators, and there is no fear from that. I think with good regulation, we can avoid this problem.
Anastasia, your final remarks?
Yes, I want to say my last word that we address only adult smokers who, for various reasons, are not able or to quit smoking. Only smokers, not youth, not new, not for a pleasure. Only smokers that they can't quit smoking, and they need something alternative, something less. Something more safer and less harmful.
Okay, thank you very much all. We had a very interesting discussion on the top of very interesting questions.
Thank you.
And looking forward for our next SCOHRE meeting, and looking forward for our next actions to communicate the conclusions of this very successful summit. Thank you very much, all of you, because all of you, with your talks and comments, contributed to the success of this summit. And of course, all of these people that have seen it, and I'm sure these people will communicate our conclusions furthermore. And of course, to all these journalists that gave us, through their questions, the chance to further communicate our thoughts on harm reduction and on novel methods of smoking cessation. This has not stopped. There is a lot of research, new products, new vapors, new ways to persuade smokers to quit smoking. So with these remarks, I would like to thank you all and conclude this session. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Very much.